Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos, where industry leaders share their thoughts and experience on the future of space business, policy, and opportunity. If you like Constellations, please support us by giving a rating and review on iTunes. And don't forget to share this podcast online to help our community grow.
Welcome to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Ian Jones. He is the founder, chief executive, and owner of Goonhilly Earth Station. He has transformed the world's most famous teleport on the verge of demolition, really?
Absolutely.
On the verge of demolition, to a modern operation with a vision of becoming a multi-faceted space hub. Goonhilly today is a highly innovative, not innovative, how do you guys say it? Innovative?
Innovative.
Yeah. Innovative teleport operation addressing today's new space environment by forging ahead in a number of commercial and scientific endeavors. Ian is uniquely qualified to address today's topic as a highly experienced entrepreneur and innovator, especially in the field of satellite communications systems engineering. Wow, you're pretty famous, aren't you?
There you go. I don't know about famous, but...
Well, Ian, here we are at the trade show in Washington, D.C., and you walk around and you get hit over the head with innovations. New this, new that, new this. I mean, so many new things here. So how does that impact the teleport on the ground?
Well, I think, the whole industry has been changing very rapidly in the last few years. Partly that's been the geostationary satellites have become, the high-throughput satellites, lots of additional bandwidth available, and the market has changed as well. So I think all of those things have put pressure on teleports. They've squeezed the prices, the bandwidth costs have come down, and it's made it a difficult environment for teleports. So we've really had to look at keeping abreast with the times and investing in new technologies.
When I did some research on your operation, Goonhilly has been around for decades and decades, and you must have had a lot of older equipment there to begin with.
Absolutely. When we first started, just looking at things like uninterruptible power supply systems, there were rooms full of batteries. And so looking at modern equipment, new amplifiers don't need to be as powerful, and so there were many things that could easily be replaced. And we literally started from seeing what we had, doing an inventory count, and seeing where we needed to improve and upgrade things.
I think if you just jump on the metro here in town and ask someone, they're going to talk about innovations in space with Bezos, and everyone's talking about innovations in space. It has to be paralleled with innovations on the ground.
It does, yes, and so the teleport has to keep up. Of course, all of those assets in space, the multi-billion dollar industry of the space sector and where it's going in the future, all of that has to communicate back with the ground. So teleports are that vital link to make all of that work.
I was on my way over here, and I was on the train, and I saw a young man get in the train. He was a real cool guy. He had on, like, cornrows, and the shirt he had on was a NASA shirt. And finally it dawned on me that, Ian, back when you got involved in this, it wasn't very cool. Now you talk about teleports and space and satellites. All of a sudden, it's really a popular topic. I mean, people want to know.
It is, and I think there's the whole inspiration of space, and the public they just love the whole concept of space. And we from the industry tend to look at our own little silos. And I think that's one of the real problems that the satellite communication industry has had for the last few years, in the same way that many other little vertical silos have. If you ask the public about space, they think about rockets and astronauts and flying around, going to the moon, and they think about stars and astronomy, and it's all one big subject for them. But for us, we think about our narrow subjects. So when I first looked at Goonhilly as potentially to rescue Goonhilly, it was clear to me that the whole teleport industry was a very mature industry, and we had to take that wider view of the whole sector. And I think that's proved very positive for us. It's proved our sort of making, if you like, because we did look at those wider things. And I think now the industry is starting to catch up. You look around at this show here, if you look at the number of new companies and new space companies that are here, that just weren't here 2 or 3 years ago, it's just testament to that fact that the whole space sector is changing a lot.
What role will the cloud and software-defined networks play in the progress of teleports?
So, well, it's certainly a challenge, isn't it, that so much data is now delivered via terrestrial means, And, we used to think in the satellite industry that we had this unique selling point that we could multicast or broadcast to millions of people at once. But now they want to receive their individual content that's tailored for themselves. So I think that the teleport needs to, and the whole satellite industry needs to embrace that and sort of be able to merge with the terrestrial world, but also be able to tailor content and be able to have a means of delivering that via satellite as well.
We know that you've been able to transform Goonhilly, and this is not my first time at the rodeo. I've seen companies go in and try to make major transformations and fail. And they've failed probably 90% of the time. But you've pulled it off. Somehow you managed to transform Goonhilly from, and you used the word historic, because it's been since the 1960s, to something new and modern. Can other companies here at the trade show learn lessons from you?
First of all, we had a belief in what we were doing. A lot of people believe in what they're doing, but I believe it was grounded in the physics and the electronics and an understanding the basics. So one of the first things that we did, we went into we picked up a contract for providing some TT&C services for a drifting satellite. And we talked to some of the technicians who from BT who were sort of helping us get started. And they told us, this dish can't do that, it doesn't have the capability. But, looked at the antenna, it was a parabolic dish and it had an antenna control unit and pressed a few buttons, and sure enough, the dish could actually slew and track a drifting satellite. So it's a matter of knowing the capabilities. That was really important. And also, I really did have this realization that we were coming late to the market. There were lots of teleports out there, and so we deliberately tried to do something different and try and have a wide range of revenue streams that weren't necessarily doing the traditional sort of uplinking or doing TV transmission or whatever. And
you're looking way beyond space here too. I think what you're doing is you're trying to come up with a multi-faceted space hub. Is that the next generation for you, or where's that down the road for you?
It is. That really is the theme. It's looking at how we can use the facilities that we have, and they're extensive facilities. We've got very good terrestrial connectivity. We've got the ability to communicate with space. We're very closely situated to subsea cable stations. All of those various buildings and offices, workshops. We looked at how we could use all of those facilities for creating different revenue streams. And they all had to have a connection with space somehow. And the Goonhilly was that sort of space glue that pulled things together. But we have lots of interest in developing new technologies, going into manufacturing, as well as the traditional provision of communication services for other clients. And I think that's where that sort of multifaceted nature of the business comes in.
I just finished teaching a class last week. I had 15 graduate students, and I think if I walked into the room and said, and now we're going to have a presentation on Lunar Pathfinder mission by Ian Jones, you get a full house there. I mean, this is really exciting. People love to hear this topic, and you're right in the middle of it.
It's exciting stuff, and Mike Pence is going to give his talk here at the Satellite Show at lunchtime today, and he's going to be talking about going back to the moon. Everybody is talking about going to the moon currently, and it's a very exciting time for young people to get involved. It's amazing how many small new companies with the next generation of graduates are really now starting to appear, and their ambition is to work and operate in this new space era and create a new economy in space exploration. And so Lunar Pathfinder is our sort of answer to that. We're planning with the European Space Agency and SSTL to develop a business around providing communications relay from lunar orbit back down to Earth.
One new area for Goonhilly is radio astronomy. Now, when I think of radio astronomy, I think of those poor academics who fight and claw to try to get their evenings in that Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and they fly all the way out there, and they spend 2 years to get their week, and then it rains. Call suicide hotline. But radio astronomy is part and parcel of what you're into now, too, isn't it?
It is, and it came right from the very beginning of our business plan that we realised that the large antennas at Goonhilly were probably a bit of overkill for traditional commercial communications, and we could use the smaller antennas on the site for that purpose, leaving the bigger antennas free for other exciting things. And so we're straight in touch with the radio astronomy community to see how we could work with them and provide them with a service. Now, I have to admit that I have a family connection here, because I have a brother who is a professor of radio astronomy at Oxford University. And so over the years I had many conversations with him around the sort of kitchen table about how the world of radio astronomy and the world of communications are very similar, but we have a completely different set of jargon. So the two communities could have a conversation without actually digging into the depths. We wouldn't realise that we were talking about the same thing with different language. It's really interesting that as you mentioned, the radio astronomers work very hard to get their funding and to make innovations, and there's very little funding available. So they have to work extra hard. And whereas we in industry we work hard to make a few % difference to get a competitive advantage, the radio astronomy community have to make an order of magnitude change to get their funding. So by working with that community, we can and if we can transfer their technology into our industry, we can make order of magnitude changes in the capability, and that's what we're working to do.
The people I know involved in radio astronomy really like to be isolated. I mean, on top of a mountain in Hawaii, in the middle of who knows where in Russia. I mean, so they like to be isolated and remote in order to catch the signal. So you must participate in remote areas as well, I imagine.
Yes, and I think the radio astronomy community really need a radio quiet area. And one of the issues that we had at Goonhilly at the beginning is that we want to transmit. We want to use the teleport to do commercial operations, and so part of that really is finding the gaps in the spectrum where the radio astronomers can work. But I think as a community now, we're finding the sort of inexorable rise of the mobile phone sort of grab for bandwidth. And with 5G now, we're seeing C-band is disappearing, and there's real push to grab all of the bandwidth in the sort of tens of gigahertz area. So the satellite community is now experiencing what the radio astronomy community had been experiencing, but just needing to find and fight for these areas of bandwidth. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, it's a fight too. Ian, thousands of people from all over the world have listened to this podcast. If you're listening to this now and want to get alerts when new episodes are available, simply go to Google, type in Constellations Podcast, click Kratos and sign up, and we'll send you out the next podcast interview that comes up, and who knows what topic's going to be. Maybe Leo and Mio. What about Leo and Mio and you?
Well, Leo and Mio and us, we're very interested, of course. That's where a lot of the industry is now looking. So to explain to people that the geostationary satellites have really been the staple of the industry for decades now, and really the industry hasn't changed that much. And the reason is that the business has been all about trying to get millions of customers to point their little dish towards your point in space where your geostationary satellite is, and make that point, that geo spot, as lucrative as you can possibly make it. And that's why the industry hasn't changed for a long time. There's been things like Iridium come along and to try and change that model, but they haven't really picked up until now. But the drive really has been the push for more and more bandwidth. And so that's really led to now this change, this revolution in low-orbiting satellites and constellations. And also the fact that the small satellites have really become standardized. And so small satellite design companies can come into existence and sort of build a capability. So, yeah, ground stations really need to be embraced to embrace that. And you need the space to do it, and you need the new antennas, the tracking antennas, and so yeah, absolutely, we're embracing that. We already host tracking antennas for some companies, and we're starting to build out our own network as well.
If your company wanted to set up a data center in Silicon Valley, they'd be paying $1 million an acre. And I see here you have 160 acres. I mean, you're in a really good situation to be flexible and have all kinds of different. I mean, it's not in a bad shape you're in.
It's well, not only we have all this space, we're actually located at the centre of the planet in terms of where all the data comes together, because we sit in Cornwall. Cornwall juts out onto the west coast of the UK into the Atlantic Ocean, and it's where many of the world's subsea cables land on their way into Europe, on their way from the Middle East and from the Far East through Europe into the Americas. So we sit right at the sort of epicentre of all of these internet connections coming together. And one actually comes directly into Goonhilly. So it's a really interesting place to have a data centre, and indeed that's what we're investing in.
There's a big fancy word that's going to impress some people. I'll say it. Deep Space Communication Network. Is that something out of a sci-fi novel, or is that something you're actually designing and looking forward to?
You know, for someone of my age, I can remember the Apollo moon landings. It was amazing to get up, to be woken up early in the morning to see Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. And that picture was beamed actually down from the moon to a dish in Australia. And then it was beamed around the world from Goonhilly, from an antenna at Goonhilly. I can remember it really clearly, even though I was 5 or 6 years old. That was done by the Deep Space Network, the NASA Deep Space Network. And for the decades since, there have been a couple of deep space networks, NASA's and the European Space Agency. But with this real push towards commercial exploration and a real resurgence of interest in going to the moon with space agencies, there's a real requirement now to provide more deep space communication services. And that's one of the sort of areas and innovations that we are developing at Goonhilly. We're in the process of building our first deep space dish, which is an upgrade of an existing 32-metre dish. We're now upgrading a second dish in collaboration with our radio astronomy partners. That's a 30-metre dish at Goonhilly. And now we're looking for sites around the world to expand and have a global deep space network.
Take off your teleport hat, take off your electrical engineering degree, and put on an MBA hat. So you're sitting over at Wharton or at Harvard and you're studying an MBAs, and one of the challenges they have in business schools now is just working with companies to make them transform into something they aren't now. And what with Amazon Web Services, the cloud, IBM, Google coming in, it's changing so fast. Software-defined networks are changing. There's IoT is everywhere. It's very hard to transform business in an effective manner. But you seem to do it. So what's the magic sauce? Is it hiring good people? Is it just get lucky? Is it, you're in the right place and you're a prestigious place, people just show up and want to work?
That's a very good question. I do think it's a matter of, on the one hand, getting lucky. It's a matter of surviving long enough to get lucky. I think I ran my own small company for 20 years before starting Goonhilly. And it's very difficult to hold on to intellectual property. Really, really difficult. And so it's a balance between being the salesperson and getting out and telling people about your technology, and then the bigger companies coming and just seeing, oh, that's a great idea, and we'll have that idea, thank you. It's very difficult to protect IP if you're a small company, because your ability to protect it is only as good as the amount of money you've got to pay the lawyers. So, the hard work was actually acquiring Goonhilly in the first place and getting over the hurdle of paying the money to British Telecom and buying it from them. And Goonhilly is such a famous name. It has such amazing facilities and capabilities. I think that was a huge hurdle to get over. But now, moving forwards, it's a matter of, okay, we have investment. How do we best get multiples on returns on that investment? And as a management team now, we look very hard. We spend a fair degree of our time thinking very hard about where the market is and how we can make an impact and what's unique about what we have and how we can really push that forward. And that's an important thing that you have to spend time on, thinking about very hard. And maybe sometimes some of the things that you would like to do that perhaps don't have the returns, to leave them behind.
Well, in America here we have this phrase called public-private partnership. And what you did is you took a public organization and bought it. And what I see on your LinkedIn profile, you're connected to a lot of the leading universities in UK that teach aerospace. And so it seems like what you're doing is out of the kindness of your heart. You're working with people in the area of radio astronomy, but you're gaining a reputation in that community as a responsible partner. And then, the smarter people can apply and find out more.
Yes, and it is partly being about a responsible partner, and it's partly about the fact that with an organisation or a site like Goonhilly, Goonhilly is so famous. It's played such an important part in the history of satellite communications. The UK public really realise that, and the public around the world who are sort of have a technology bent to them know the name as well. And they let us know, and we feel a responsibility to do the right thing to a certain degree. But it's not all altruism. It's a realisation that by working closely with the universities and working directly with the PIs who are doing this new research, it can give us a commercial advantage. And so it's absolutely right to find a way to draw them in and to have a good reason to work with us, because it's so easy just to get on with your own thing and not do that. So we spend a lot of time trying to nurture that relationship. But it definitely has a commercial sort of underlying reason for doing it.
Well, in American football, they have the 2-minute drill. And we're right about at the 2-minute drill here. And so what I want you to do is take off all these hats and put on your thinking hat. So what's going to happen 4 or 5 years from now, 6 or 7 years in general in this community? What kind of transitions do you see taking place?
I think there'll be the rise of the constellations. I think space exploration, all these...
Sounds like a movie, doesn't it? The Rise of the Constellations.
There you go, you see. Who knows what we'll be seeing in space. So, yeah, I think supporting constellation providers, I think exploration, new data coming down from space, all of these Earth observation satellites and other applications, that's where the changes will be. And then the key to that will be to find ways to monetize it, to find commercial applications of this new space data.
Ian, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I'd like to thank our guest, Ian Jones, CEO of Goonhilly Earth Station.
Thanks for listening to Constellations, the podcast from Kratos. If you like this interview, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a review.